Mhm.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm Cameron Sorsby, and this is Zach Slayback. We are part of Praxis, and today we'll be having our second webinar of the year, how to kick butt and gain influence in the workplace.
Yeah, Cameron and I have learned a lot of the things we're going to go over tonight, both from our own experience. We're both, pretty young, kicking butt and getting influence in the workplace, I think.
I think so.
I think so. And from both our interactions with lots of young people through Praxis and through the successful people we've been able to interact with through the program as well. We interact, quite often with CEOs, founders, presidents, people on boards, people who have founded companies, venture capitalists, people who themselves were once young people. Some of them still are. And I think that we've been able to distill a lot of things from interacting with these people through Praxis and just through our everyday lives. But we've been able to distill that down to at least 5 things. And those are the things we really want to go over this evening.
Yeah. But before we do, if y'all haven't heard of Praxis, Praxis is a 10-month program for young entrepreneurs. And within those 10 months, you get placed at one of our business partners where you're working 30 hours a week. You're gaining real-world skills and developing professionally. This is not an internship. You are doing some pretty awesome things with some dynamic companies. And in addition to working at these companies, you're also developing your intellectual and philosophical beliefs and critical thinking skills through our amazing curriculum
It's really quite flooring.
Put together. So, but before we get started, since you're here joining us, you're clearly interested in how you can succeed in the workplace, and as a young person, how you can educate yourself and develop professionally. So I'd just like to mention we have a new book called The Future of School, which you can receive a digital copy of that if you go to thepraxisyear.com.
Yeah. So with all of that in mind, let's just get into it, huh?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I want to start more in like the abstract, right? There are certain mindsets you can inculcate. There are certain ways you can think about the workplace, about yourself, about your career, that are going to be really helpful to you to actually create real concrete deliverables in the real world. If we can understand what these are, then we can leave with a couple action items for the rest of the evening. So one of the things that I think is most important when you're a young person entering the workplace is that you are able to create and exude power for yourself. And this isn't like some crazy idea like, oh, you need to go and like control the workplace, overthrow your boss and things like that, and institute a little despotism of your cubicle. But rather that what I mean by power is that you have an ability to at least feel like you are in control of the conversations and relationships that you get into in the workplace. So I think that this can come in a couple of ways, right? You can just be very confident in what you do. You can be very confident in who you are. But I think more than anything else, one of the best ways that you can actually create and exude power for yourself is never even doubt yourself when you're going into these situations. Now, that sounds kind of like a lofty thing, like, okay, how do I not doubt myself? But imagine you're joining a sales team of maybe 5 people, and you're going to go do a complex corporate sale that could result in $100,000 for the company. When you walk into that room, you're maybe 22, 23, 24, 25 years old, and there are going to be people in that room who have been working in their jobs longer than you have been alive. And you will probably think to yourself, holy crap, this person probably does not take me seriously. I'm just like this dumb young person coming in here thinking I can run the place. If you think that way, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're going to shrink down in your chair when they point things out to you. You're going to get sweaty palms. You're going to get nervous. You're going to kind of like become obsequious to them. You're just going to like let them walk all over you. If you know walking into that situation that you can gain control of that situation by never even doubting yourself in the first place, then you can create that sort of power for your relationship. I've done this myself. I've had, through what I do, I tend to talk to a lot of CEOs, a lot of venture capitalists, and tell them a little bit about our program, things like that. And I met with this one guy once. At I was meeting with him. He was a real estate developer, and we started talking about the program. And he very clearly didn't quite get what I was trying to say. Maybe I didn't say it correctly, but I could feel my palms getting sweaty while I was talking to him. And I was like, oh, crap. This guy's in control of this situation now. and I could feel myself, kind of sitting back in my seat, getting smaller and smaller every time he was saying something. And had I not even thought in the first place, oh, I need to make sure that that he understands that I'm not just this 21-year-old coming in here to explain myself and what I'm doing. If I just thought, I know what I'm doing. This guy could be 15, this guy could be 25, this guy could be 55. And I'm not going to change my pitch for any of those people. I know what I'm doing for each of them. Then I probably wouldn't have had the sweaty palms and the experience that the feeling that I'd just been like run over by a train when I walked out of that experience. Similarly, in his book 0 to 1, Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, one of the primary investors in Facebook, says that cultures, both company cultures and cultures of a society, can have different ways of viewing the future, right? They can be indefinite or definite, optimistic or pessimistic. He says, like, a good company culture is definite optimistic, meaning like they can see the future, they see that it's good, and they're going to make it. They know how to get there. That's what you want for yourself. Any situation you go into, you have a plan, you're going to execute it. If you know that what that plan is and you know that you can execute it and that you can deliver on it, you will feel yourself creating that power for yourself in that situation. So ultimately, it comes down to a sense of confidence, a sense that you are in control of that relationship with that person, and if you feel that you're starting to lose control, you can rein it back in.
Yeah. Zach, a quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
We're talking pretty abstract here.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has a big meeting with their supervisor or a client or such that they feel a little intimidated about tomorrow. What would be like the 1-2 sentence piece of advice you'd give them going into that tomorrow?
Number one, know your stuff. Don't doubt anything fact-wise that you'll need for that meeting. If you know in the back of your mind, like, okay, well, they might ask about X, and you don't know what the answer to X is, then you need to do some more research. You need to know what you're going to be talking about. And 2, know that you know what you're talking about. They might question you. They might not believe what you're saying is actually the factual truth. But if you know everything that you know that you know, right? And how many no's are there in that? There's 2. You know that you know what you're talking about, then you're going to be able to exude this confidence, and you're going to ultimately be able to create power for yourself in this relationship.
Yeah. Good. All right. Our next point I'm going to be talking about, and that's treating an entry-level position, whether it's an internship you have during high school or college, or maybe your first, 1 or 2 jobs out of school. Treating that really as a time for exploration. I know a lot of young people, and myself included, when I was coming out of college and I got my first job, I was very excited just to have that job. It was working for a great organization, and going into that, I was so focused on my actual role and the responsibilities that were included in that role that I never really, thought more broadly than that. What could I really gain professionally from getting a broader experience with the company, or just looking at how else I can help out. I kind of put limits on myself. So in that role, I'm going to talk about actually. I worked at the Foundation for Economic Education coming out of college, and I was in development, so I did fundraising, and in that role, I did a lot of administrative tasks, but also helped out with some high prospecting donor research and some donor meetings and networking, such like that. But I would say through my first 8 months or so in that position, it was not my favorite position. And I did gain a lot of value out of it, but I feel like I missed out on a lot of opportunities to kind of explore other spaces within the organization. And this is something I think a lot of people do, especially young. You get assigned a particular job title, you're told what those expectations are, and they don't think, they kind of limit themselves to that. So what really changed for me 7 to 8 months down the road, for a short period of time, I had developed some good relationships with colleagues of mine who were in our program department. And it was really at the time where, because of those good relationships, I kind of got to input some of my own opinions to their work, and they would come to me for just some extra feedback and whatnot. And I started to exert myself more in those roles, and I showed to other people in the organization who had management decision-making ability that, one, maybe this was a better fit for me because they could see that I really came alive in that position. But also, even if during your day-to-day role you really enjoy it and you're kicking ass at it, then you should be looking for other ways that you can create value for your company. For example, Zach here, he's our business development director. And obviously we're a startup, we're pretty small staff-wise, so we kind of input everything. We have input on everyone else's ownership roles. But Zach has been very helpful for me on how to deal with our application process and whatnot. And there's no question that's a role that he's been in himself. But there's no question maintaining a broader view of the company by just having a hand in other parts of the business gives him some good insight into what he's doing as a business development director. I work more with our participants, and Zach is working with our potential and current business partners. But going to a new business partner and pitching them on our program, they're going to want to hear what our participants are like at the time. And he's able to do that because he maintains, having some sort of role in all the different facets of the company. And as a young person, this might sound intimidating, but I feel like, there's especially the more established people in your company, they're willing to reach out to you. If you go to the marketing director, if you work in programs or whatnot, just another department of the company, and saying, hey, I would like to help out. I have complete control of my own responsibilities. I would like to work some overtime and just get experience in this different aspect of the company. There's no question they'd be willing to use you in some role.
So what would you say to someone, though, who is at a smaller company, maybe 10 people, and they find themselves, sometimes they're really working, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, even beyond their role. But when they are doing that, maybe they're not nearly as fulfilled as they thought they may be. Or there are some weeks where they're working 20 hours a week and spending the rest playing Tetris online, or 30 hours a week and looking at pictures of cats on YouTube, videos of cats on YouTube. YouTube is the thing that people look at videos on, right?
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
So what would I say to someone who's maybe not taking advantage of their full time?
Either they're not taking advantage of their full time, or they feel like a lot of their time, they're not being put to their best use in.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect opportunity.
How do they explore is pretty much what I'm asking.
Right. I think the best thing you can do is actually create a self-driven project instead of going to another department, which certainly is identifying an opportunity for growth for your own time. Whether it's putting a plan together and pitching it to someone, taking time to develop that. But even better yet, if you can, create some type of minimal viable product that really, confronts that issue that you've identified, that's an opportunity for growth. If you can show some type of minimal value that you can now bring to a supervisor or someone else in the company, you can actually create your own role that you didn't think was possible because no one had thought of it before. So, just through that method of exploration, you could actually craft a role that's more suited for you.
So as kind of an extension of that, I think that there is, for young people, there's kind of an expectation in a lot of workplaces, especially ones who have had young people come through the early ranks of the company, that they're going to mess up. They're going to, maybe slack around a little bit. They're going to be used to, given assignments and due dates from college and from high school. They're going to think like students when in reality that's not how the workplace works. So there's kind of this weird paradox for young people, right? So the bar is much lower for you. Like, you can mess up a couple of times and people aren't going to be nearly as pissed off. But simultaneously, the bar needs to be higher for you personally, because if you know that people have lower expectations of young people in general, then you can really blow their expectations away. So the third point I would just say is get shit done. Just be competent. If somebody tells you to do something, do it. If somebody asks you to take ownership over a project, don't only take ownership over what they asked you about, but keep running with the project, adding value at every stage of the process until you run into a wall, and then you need to go back to that person and ask them for more permission. If somebody, say you're in a generic marketing role at your company, you're a startup and they have like a marketing specialist role or something like that, in your extra time, not only should you be trying to optimize the interactions on Facebook for your social media campaigns, but you should be trying to optimize your open rates if that's something that you have management, that you have decision rights over. Similarly, if you are giving somebody, if somebody's asked you to accomplish something, you're probably going to feel a little motivated, especially if you're kind of on a high after like being really good at doing this. You'll probably tell them, cool, I'll get that to you by Friday. And if they didn't actually ask you to get it to them by Friday, I'd actually really caution against doing this. This is an extension of the idea of like get shit done. Because what you're starting to do is, by telling them, I'll get it to you by Friday, maybe in their mind, like a time that would have been fine for them was next Wednesday. But by saying Friday, they're now going to expect Friday, even if they weren't originally. So if you miss that deadline, if it's too soon and you find yourself at the last second, maybe putting it together and you send it to them and it's a really shoddy product, or you completely miss the deadline altogether, even if you get it to them by Tuesday, they're still going to be a little irked. They're gonna know that you set unrealistic expectations for yourself, and they're going to know that they can't necessarily trust all of your expectations of yourself in the future. So it's really, really important when you are getting shit done that you actually carry through on what you can get done. You are a person of your word. Now, I'm not saying if somebody asks you to write a very simple email campaign, like one that should take half an hour, tell them, yeah, I'll get that to you next month. I'm saying just be realistic about your time frame. And if you have to, if you don't know what your time frame is, maybe be a little more liberal. Tell them, yeah, I'll get it to you by next Friday, when in your mind you can easily get it to them by Tuesday. Then blow your own expectations away and get it to them by Monday. Similar to, as to what Cameron was saying, you don't want to be a person who's just twiddling your thumbs in your extra time. Not only should you be getting the stuff done that people have assigned to you, but you need to be assigning things to yourself. We here at Praxis, we talk a lot about being an entrepreneur and how everybody needs to be an entrepreneur. Well, not everybody wants to own their own business. Not everybody can own their own business and do it successfully. But you need to be an entrepreneur in your own career. And what we mean by that is you need to take ownership and be a creative problem solver. You need to be somebody who can create a business plan for your career. Somebody who can go out and, I have 10 hours of downtime. Cool. Maybe I should put together, maybe you're in sales. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put together this deck for this new type of sale we're going to be going into. Or I'm going to be doing some prospecting today on LinkedIn. Or maybe I'll find a better customer relations management software that we can upgrade to. There are tons of things you can do. If you're sitting around waiting for assignments to come to you, as if you are in a college classroom, you're going to really let down your employer's expectations, especially in like a fast-moving small company.
Yeah. So my next point is to have a growth mindset. And by growth mindset, I mean people with that growth mindset believe that their intelligence and their personality are actually things that can be improved upon and developed. Carol Dweck, who I highly recommend reading, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. And in this book, she talks about comparing people with a growth mindset versus people who do not. And she basically states and backs up, people with a growth mindset, they embrace challenges, they look at failure as an opportunity to learn, they work harder, they gain wisdom from others, they seek out that wisdom, and overall they tend to achieve their goals at a much higher usage rate than their peers. So one of the key things I'm talking about here is not looking at yourself as your permanent skill set. One, looking to, like I said before, looking to explore and how can you grow professionally, how can you help out your company more. But one of the things, I asked numerous former colleagues and supervisors and such, and what is one thing you would like to tell young people going into a job that they can do that will make them successful. And the answer I kept hearing is solve problems before I have to find out about them. And this is actually very key to the growth mindset, because in the growth mindset, you look at yourself as someone who's evolving and developing, and if you're not, and you come up with a problem at work, and you know right there on the spot, I was like, I don't know how to do this. I can't figure this out. You're going to go to someone else and lean on them and their own wisdom. Much more valuable, 99% of the time, will be to develop that own skill yourself and figure it out right there on the spot. Google is your best friend. You can find out, you can gain some type of insight, especially in entry-level positions. The things that you are really having trouble with are typically things that you can really be helped by on Google. Just basic things, even finding out how to create formulas and Excel sheets. There's been numerous interns that have come up to me like, how do I do this in Excel or Google spreadsheets? Like, dude, you would have looked 10 times better if first I didn't have to know about this, or if you came to me and told me how I could do something new with this spreadsheet or something.
This is funny you use it as an example. I have a friend who works for a city government, of course, and he's been promoted time and time again, largely because he can really impress his coworkers by his ability to actually just get stuff done on Excel, to the point that almost all of his coworkers will email him and be like, hey, so-and-so, how do you do X, Y, and Z in Excel? And what I'll tell them? I'll come show you in 10 minutes when I'm done with this project. And that project will be him sitting on Google and being like, okay, how do you do X, Y, and Z in Excel? And then he'll walk down the hall, lean over their shoulder, do it in Excel, and then they'll sit back, whoa, how'd you do that? You're such an Excel whiz. You should get a promotion. And like time and time again, he gets promoted because his coworkers don't know how to use Google. They don't know how to just sit back and actually use the search functions in Google correctly. So I think that and when we're talking about this growth-oriented mindset, I think that the surefire way to see that a company, that either somebody in a company needs to be fired or a company's culture needs to be reformed, is if anybody in the company says, well, that's outside my pay grade. That's above my pay grade. Now, I don't know how to do that. I'm not paid to figure that out.
Right.
It's like, soon you're not going to be paid at all. So.
Yeah, Zach, before you move on to your next point, I just wanted to mention that we will be having another webinar on April 21st, which is on a Tuesday. Yeah. And there should be information about that in the Facebook event of this particular event.
Facebook event of this event.
Yeah, and then after we're going to be discussing this stuff for a good, another 10 minutes or so. But after that, we're going to be taking your questions, and we'd love to open this up to your thoughts. So get prepared. Start thinking about some questions that we could potentially help you with, or if you have some points to raise, maybe that you disagree with some of the stuff we talked about, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, you can always find more webinars like this, more videos, recordings of some of our talks, either our public talks or the talks that we do similar to this, at either our YouTube channel or at our Google Plus page. That's google.com/plus discover Praxis. And on Facebook, you can find many of our events that are at facebook.com/discover Praxis.
Yeah.
So,
and the links for that next event should be in Showcase, along with the link to thepraxisyear.com.
Yeah. So the last point, which I think is, compared to the first one, it's like, you need to exude power and confidence in the workplace, make a mindset philosophy about work, is going to be much more concrete, right? What is one thing that I think that any young person, entry-level person in the workplace can do that will ultimately help them? And that is take advantage of the successful people around you. And by that, I mean ask them out to coffee, ask them out to lunch. Successful people tend to be successful because they surround themselves with other successful people. They surround themselves with people they want to be around. They surround themselves with people who push them, who help them exceed expectations and excel at what they do. So when you're a young person in the workplace, whether it's a 10-person company or a 200-person company, you can email, the upper management and say, hey, so-and-so, I found that I think that, your interest in whatever is really interesting. I'd love to get coffee and, talk to you a little bit about it. or just get to know you. Even if you email the CEO and tell them, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, how you got here, what your background is, let me buy you coffee. Even if they say no, well, now you're in a position where you don't really have an excuse to not email anybody else in the company because you just emailed the person who's highest up in the company. So you shouldn't be afraid of emailing a senior management person or your direct manager. Once a week, just invite somebody out to coffee, invite them out to lunch, pick their brain, just talk to them. Successful people, like I said, surround themselves with successful people. There's a great saying that's you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around.
I love that.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So if you're somebody who is young in the workplace trying to either go out on your own and you want to learn from other people's experiences or learn from other people's experiences within the company, the best way to do that is find out what other people's experiences actually are. You just can't sit back and think, oh, I don't know what they are. I can imagine what they are. Similarly, I think that there's an important point about social capital here, right? So when you're working as somebody for a company, what you're ultimately trying to do is help the company acquire capital, acquire value. You yourself, though, can acquire what we call social capital. And this is, when somebody's going to be doing a promotion review, a raise review, maybe they're doing a reference for you. How are they going to think of you? Do they have reason to go out on a limb for you? Do they have a reason to stick their neck out for you? If you've acquired social capital with that person, yes, they do. They think of you positively, and they'd be willing to say, so-and-so's a really great person. They don't have to say, so-and-so bought me a $6 latte at Starbucks one day, but maybe they don't even remember that. But you've just been able to ingratiate yourself in their mind to the point that they just associate you with good things. They just associate you with a good experience. And if you couple that with actually being a good worker, I'm not saying lead them to be dishonest, right? But lead them to want to say, Cameron's a good dude. I would give Cameron a good reference.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 quick points to add on that. One, obviously, what Zach is talking about here doesn't just go with the people within your company that you're working for now. Whether it's, if you're in a position, especially entry level, where you may not be happy in the job you have and you're looking to kind of look at new areas of industry or whatnot, seek those people out. If there's a company that you think is really cool, just go to their website, look and see if you can find someone's contact information who's doing something that you think is interesting, and reach out to them. One of the biggest things that young people don't take advantage of is that more established and successful people are completely flattered when they get an email or someone comes up to them in person and just asks them, your job, your life is so interesting. I would love to know more. I would love to take you out for a cup of coffee or lunch. And as a bonus, they'll probably end up paying for that coffee or lunch, so that's always good. But this is actually something that has led to my position at Praxis. While I was still in school, I just finished up a summer internship, and I got back to Charleston, where I was living and attending school, and I knew our current CEO, Isaac Morehouse. I had met him at one talk that he gave, and I kept in touch with him through email before I was leaving town for the summer. And as I was returning, I gained a lot of good experience over that summer, but what I didn't gain was experience in the particular work that Isaac did. And I emailed Isaac before I got back to town and said, hey, when I get back in, I would love just to pick your brain about what you're doing and grab some lunch. That turned into my full-time internship, my senior year of school. And I stayed in touch with them. Now I'm working on a really cool project. So you just don't know what things are going to lead to, and it's a minimal investment that you put in to take someone's time who you find really interesting. And again, you just don't know where it could go, but most of the time it will only lead to good things.
There's a great line that I've heard Isaac and others use multiple times. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's a biblical line that's you never know when you'll be entertaining angels, right?
Right.
So, first of all, be cordial to people. because you don't know who's watching, and even if you do know the people who are watching, you don't know who they're connected to and things like that. Secondly, the people, even if you're, again, like just somebody who you happen to know, ask them out to coffee, you don't know who that person's connected to. They might introduce you to a new job or something like that. In the startup world, it's a particularly useful line because you might be entertaining angel investors as well. But I think that's a really, and be picky about your time too. There's another verse about you never want to throw pearls before swine. If you can either spend the evening wining and dining some really interesting entrepreneur or venture capitalist, or be out with like your college buddies getting really drunk, where are you going to give your time to? Seriously think about that. Your time is scarce. And if you view yourself as somebody whose time is valuable, then you're going to spend it with around valuable people.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are our 5 points that we covered. And I think one of the big things that carries through all of what we discussed so far today is, this is your career. You have to take charge of it. And you have to be proactive in finding out what you want and how to create that successful career for you. And that really starts with whatever work you're doing now, do it well and exceed expectations. Blow them out of the water. And from there, you can go and search for new opportunities to create, value for yourself and whatever company you're working for, or whatever company you want to be working for.
Right. Yep. No, and I think, like we noted at the beginning of the talk, beginning of the conversation, a lot of these are things we learn either ourselves through our own experience, or through watching participants in our program. Participants go through Praxis and learn a lot of these things firsthand, or talking to the companies who are the business partners in our program, or the investors who have invested in some of those companies. So ultimately, the best way to learn these things and really inculcate them in your character and your work experience is by actually getting work experience. And there are multiple points throughout this. There are multiple themes and how you can gain work experience, especially if you're a young person. You're either in high school or college and you don't really know what you can do. There are other ways that you can approach this. As we noted in the beginning of the talk, we did just release The Future of School. It's an excellent little book. There are a lot of tips in it. It's not just, what's school going to look like in 10 years, but how do you go out and create that value for yourself? What are the certain things you can do? How do you approach an entrepreneur who runs a really cool company that you want to gain experience with? All these things and more are covered in this, and I highly recommend you check it out. You can check it out at thepraxisyear.com. You can check it out in Showcase, where the link is, and I think it's really worth your time. I was personally impressed by it when I went through it. So.
Yeah, so we do have a few questions in the queue, so let's get to some Q&A.
Yep.
The first one, what is the best way to respond to failure in the workplace? How does one regain coworker trust and confidence after committing mistakes?
Can I handle this one?
You can go first.
Okay, cool. So there are a couple of things you can do, right? When everybody's going to fail in the workplace. That just has to happen. If you haven't failed in the workplace, you haven't taken enough risks. If you're somebody who has never failed, you've never failed academically, you've never failed in the workplace, you've never failed in your career, you've never failed in your personal life, you don't take enough risks. Because those risks, while you could end up failing from them, they could have very phenomenal payoffs, right? High risk, high reward. So people are going to ultimately fail, and you are probably going to betray a couple people's trust while you do that. People are going to expect you to do certain things and succeed at them. When people's expectations of you, again, either personal or in the workplace, are violated, even if they don't feel like even if they know they shouldn't feel this way, they're going to resent you a little bit. They're going to resent, like, well, why didn't this person expect that they're going to fail? And the best way that you can do that is the best way you can regain their trust is to recognize that you failed. Make that clear to them. Say, look, I failed. Yeah, I messed up. I didn't know what I thought I needed to know. And make it clear, not only fix the mistake to the best extent that you possibly can. There are multiple examples from my own career I could use here. But if you send out, even something little, like you send out an email newsletter that has one of the links actually sends somebody to like a YouTube video of like cats frolicking in a field, rather than taking them to like a landing page for your company. You know, make it clear to the people in your company, I messed up. Here's why I messed up. It's not going to happen again. And correct it to the best extent possible. Maybe send a follow-up email saying like, this is a minor correction to the email that we just sent. We quote the section and then say, actually, we wanted to link to this.
Yeah. Two brief things to add there. Yeah. You know, as a young person in that entry-level position, your company is very aware that they're making an investment in your future work. So when you do mess up, when you do make those mistakes, be aware that those are expected. You know, as long as it's not catastrophic, it's something you can absolutely recover from. So in some way, don't take it too seriously. But in that same vein, if you are able to show remorse and understand that you aren't there to make mistakes and that you can improve, that is very serious. There's actually been a couple people who I've dealt with professionally over the years, and you know they'll make like little tiny mistakes all the time, and one of them very much showed remorse and time after time, and you know he comes back and he's very sincere in making that mistake and does what he can to fix it. And another one, it's essentially the same outcome. The mistake gets fixed, but his behavior and his mannerisms are a lot more lackadaisical, and that makes a big difference. So we have our next question are there any tips you guys have for daily organization?
Oh, I think for me, I am a big proponent of this idea. People that have it beget to have it. Yeah. So it's really important to actually habituate habit. That sounds kind of like a weird thing to say, right? Like what came first, the chicken or the egg? But just make a very, very clear point to yourself for like a week or two that you're going to accomplish X, Y, and Z every single day. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be especially hard for the first couple of days. You'll want to go to bed at like 9:30 when you're really tired and you still have Y and Z to complete. You'll want to get distracted on something else. You'll convince yourself that something's actually a much more valuable project. But if you don't actually build that habit, if you don't actually build a sense of habituation, it's never going to get any easier. If you do that, then every time you do it, every time you do it to get more organized, it's going to get a lot easier. For both Cameron and I have like these personal development projects that we do.
Right.
And it's different for each of us, but for both of us, but there are certain things that we need to accomplish every day. And some of those things are really hard to do, but as you do them more and more, they become a lot easier. So maybe you just make it yourself, when you wake up in the morning, have a to-do list. One of my favorite tools on a very concrete point is called the Eisenhower decision matrix. And it's supposedly something that was used by President Eisenhower, but it has things that are urgent and important, urgent and not important, not important and urgent, not important, not urgent. And you organize them in that certain way, and then you can delegate certain tasks, or you can schedule certain tasks, and certain tasks you need to get done now if they're like urgent and important.
What was the name of that again?
It's called the Eisenhower decision matrix. So Eisenhower is in like President Eisenhower decision matrix, and it's a 2x2 matrix.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would just add to that to build on Zach's point about kind of creating these daily habits that you set for yourself, and that just builds discipline. It's really important as a young person who most likely has gone through kind of your standard education, that now that you're essentially in charge of all of your time, that you create that structure for yourself and you instill that discipline within yourself. That's been one of the biggest challenges for me over the last couple of years as a young professional to do. And I finally feel like over the last 6 months or so, I've gotten a fairly good grasp. I'm really looking forward to developing that more. Other small tips on just daily organization. I can just give you some insight into my own organization setup. I actually keep a couple lists of the big projects and just like the day-to-day tasks I'm working on through two different ways. One, I really like writing everything down. I just have like a basic empty pad that I just write everything down that I'm working on through the week or through the day. And then another good system, if you're looking for more structure, is Franklin Cubby, and that's Franklin Covey. And they let you. You can find it online, and there's an app too. But you can kind of structure. You can prioritize your different tasks that you're working on, and it keeps track of what you haven't completed yet, what's in progress, what's already completed, and kind of sets it up really nicely for you. But the biggest help for me is that I'm not a very organized person, so having 2 checks on myself I found really useful.
Yeah.
So next question is, when is the right time to challenge your boss, and how should someone go about questioning a higher-up's decision? I like this question a lot, and I really enjoy, having that back and forth with higher ups and supervisors and whatnot. I've certainly heard some horror stories from.
Not everybody has a company culture that it makes it easy to question the boss and to call the boss out. Thankfully, I think we both have had experience in companies primarily where you can.
Yep.
If you are in a culture where that's kind of encouraged, or at least they say it's encouraged, and nobody is actually terrified of the boss, I encourage you to do it as often as you feel comfortable. You don't want to be somebody who's constantly arguing with the boss. You don't want to be constantly second-guessing them, because eventually they'll be like, why did I bring this person on the team in the first place? But no, especially if you're working closely with the supervisor, and especially if it is the boss of the company, nobody likes a yes man either. People want people who will challenge them if they think they're wrong.
Yeah.
I recently ran into a situation where a friend of mine was hiring for a position at his company, and he was considering multiple people for this position, and he asked me for some ideas and some references, and I threw out a couple names, and a couple of the names were shot down, even though this person would be probably a good fit at the company. They were shut down. Well, that person's too much of a yes man or a yes woman. That person they're not willing to tell me I'm wrong, or tell the entire company they're wrong. We're going to be laying off 20 people or something like that. So there are a couple of reasons why you want to do this. One is it signals to your boss a sense of entrepreneurialism. It signals to your boss you're not just a drone who goes out and does the work that you're handed to you. Secondly, sometimes the boss is wrong. And sometimes you approach a situation with a mindset that they didn't even think of going into it.
Yeah. You don't want to be the person who you find in a classroom who has to raise their hand, has to comment, and ends up talking more than the professor does. And you can see this in the workplace too. It's just this person's out of school now and graduated and has to be in your office. So that's fun.
There's a good corollary to nobody likes a yes man, and it's that, especially in meetings, especially if you're reviewing job candidates or something like that, you want to keep your powder dry. There are a couple origins for this metaphor, but if you've ever been to a gym where there's some heavy lifting, there's usually some chalk powder there, and if the chalk powder is wet, you can't put it on your hands, and you put it on your hands to make sure you don't drop the weights. And if you're constantly going to the powder, then the powder is going to get wet from sweaty palms and things like that. What this means in the workplace is, if you have somebody who every time you're interviewing a job candidate or every time you're making a decision, they sit at the back room and at the back of the room and say, well, I don't think that's a good idea, or you know what my idea is, or well, let me throw you my 2 cents, and everybody in the room internally sighs and thinks, oh, here this person goes again. Meanwhile, if you're the person, and I've been guilty of this myself, so this is one of my favorite corollaries to nobody likes a yes man. Similarly, on the other end, you don't want to be the person who's constantly offering your opinion, because then your opinion is worthless. If you're the person who only voices their opinion once every 10 times or something like that, then when you actually say something, assuming you aren't just saying it to say it, your coworkers will take you much more seriously, including your boss.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're lucky, and in my experience, I've had some really great supervisors who have been very open and encouraged my feedback. That obviously that's an ideal situation. But still, even if you're in those situations, remember there is still that supervisor relationship that you have with them. So just be aware of that. There's certainly a right and wrong way to bring up feedback, and if you're going to bring up feedback, especially if you're in a more collaborative role, make sure to make your point clear, but also before you do that, have some point of agreement with that person. Compliment them on their idea, where they're coming from, come to some form of understanding and feel like you're on the same page with that person, if that makes sense. We're going to take one final question, and it's a touchy one. What are your thoughts on company politics, and how does one stay out of petty conflicts between teams or people? I hate this topic. It's exhausting.
I'll let you start.
Okay, so sometimes it's unavoidable, right? We work with people, and people are certainly not perfect, and some just have a different approach to professionalism and approach to work than others might. And I think some really good advice here, and that really works in a lot of scenarios. But treat people as neutral. You have that person who can be a pain in the ass to work with, or you have that person who's always trying to, maybe stab in the back is a harsh word, but is always trying to get a leg up on other people instead of working together for the betterment of themselves and the company. But do what you can to work with them as much as you have to, and don't let it injure you emotionally. Stay kind of unattached from that situation.
Yeah, and an extension of what Cameron means by treat everybody as neutral is if you start to view everybody as hostile, maybe you have maybe you're your third day in the company, you're bright-eyed and excited, and somebody does stab you in the back, like a blatant example of company politics. It might be difficult for you to trust your coworkers going forward. But if you view everybody as hostile, then even the people who aren't hostile, you're going to look for things where they're hostile. This person didn't invite me out to lunch this time. They must be trying to undermine me. They're trying to get my job, or they're trying to get me fired, or something like that. View everybody as neutral until you have very good reasons to think otherwise. You don't want to always view everybody as neutral, especially if you're in a large organization that's prone to politics. It's very possible that you're being dragged into a political situation. Yeah. My honest opinion on this is I have a very low tolerance for playing politics, so I'm attracted naturally to smaller organizations. Smaller organizations, as in startups, small, medium-sized businesses, are much less likely to have politics simply because they have many fewer people and many fewer levels of things going on in the company. As soon as you have the potentiality for secrets between staff members, you're going to have the potentiality for politics. So if you can get in any situation where you can avoid that, I think that's, if you're like me and you have a really low tolerance of politics, then you want to be attracted to smaller organizations. Either go work for a startup or found your own.
Yeah. All right, well, I hope this webinar has been helpful for you tonight. We're going to be doing a lot more throughout the year. We have some really exciting topics. You'll be hearing from us again, and in addition to some of our other Praxis staff, including our founder. But also, we're really excited to bring in some external people from the company that we've developed relationships and we've learned a lot from. So stay tuned. And also, if this stuff really connects with you, it's because you do want to take control of your own career, your own education, and what you want to do professionally. So I do encourage you to check out thepraxisyear.com. Check out the book, The Future of School. Learn more about kind of what skills you need to acquire to be successful and how to acquire them. And if you're interested in the program itself, and taking 10 months to work with some really successful, awesome people and what it means to take control of your education, please do check out the program.
Similarly, feel free to reach out to either of us. I'm Zachary at discoverpraxis.com. That's my email address. Is ZACHARY at discoverpraxis.com.
Yeah, and Cameron at discoverpraxis.com. We'll be sure to include it in the Facebook event page.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right. Is there anything else to add?
Nothing else on my end.
All right. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks.